from Atlanta, Georgia, and then he moved to LA, San Francisco, and finally in New York. I'd like to start by saying that we are very, very happy to support Alex Fund in promoting this film and in organizing, setting up this evening. We believe that it's not only an evening about film, about artistic excellence, but it's also about the generosity. And we have probably the most generous public in the audience tonight. About Tudor Giurgiu, and then I will start very, very shortly in machine gunning him with questions. No, I will open the floor very, very quickly so that you can be in a dialogue with this extraordinary the director. I would say that Tudor Giurgiu is probably one of the most influential people in Romanian cinema. He wouldn't accept it, he would deny it because he's very, very modest and doesn't like big words. But I don't know, for some reason, always, when I talk about Tudor Giurgiu, I want to use superlatives. Because he deserves them very much, and I think somebody like him is very apt to present his fantastic movie, brilliant film in an evening like this. He is a film with a fantastic filmmaker with a unique range. He moves from comedy to interior drama to political thriller, and now to a historical film that really redefines the way we see the revolution, and it's probably one of the best films made in Romania in the past 30 years, since the events that are depicted on the screen. He's also a very successful producer. Libra Films is attached to some of the most successful projects in Romania today. Has been involved in several productions that are showered with prizes everywhere in the world. And last but not least, it's not only a filmmaker, a producer, but an institution. Together with his team, Tudor created the most important, influential, successful film festival in Romania, Transylvania Film Festival, TIFF in short, a true showcase of what is best in Romanian cinema, and the perfect connection between our filmmaking community and the filmmaking community and the world. So this is the man. He wouldn't accept anything that I said tonight. In fact, I should have started by saying that his true masterpiece is not what you saw on the screen. It's somewhere over there. You can hear. It's over there. That's the true masterpiece. The one and only Alex Giurgiu. But we'll talk about that later, maybe. Very grateful that you have made the trip to New York. It wasn't planned, but thanks to the beautiful efforts of Raluca Fuchs, who put this together in such a wonderful way. You decided to make the trip. Some of you may know Nasty, a documentary that makes huge waves now in Romania, and not only in Romania, about the tennis legend Ilie Năstase. Has just been released, has just had the premiere in Romania, has just been selected at Cannes Festival in France, and Tudor is working feverishly with his team in order to prepare the launching of this documentary in France. And he has to say, he said to himself, oh my God, I gotta be in Romania to take care of this, the promotion of this film. but because of the nature of this event, because of the fact that this is an event about film, but about generosity, about history, but about what's happening today in Romania, he decided to come. Thank you very much, Tudor, and I would like to start by asking you, you have had several meetings with the American public throughout these last months. What was the reactions? What was the reaction of the American public? How do you see the way the film was understood, was perceived in the US?
I mean, for me, what was very important was the reaction of the American public, as you've said. I mean, with the Romanians, I think it's a total different thing. It's about nostalgia. It's about reviving some feelings which they had during those days. You know, you remember the chaos, you remember the killings, you remember...
For the Romanians.
Yeah, for the Romanians, but I think for the American audience it's interesting. That's why I was mentioning those things at the very beginning, because I know that the first 20 minutes it was a deliberate confusion, which I wanted to happen this way, because I thought it would be important for every of you to really feel in the same shoes as the officers in the Policia building, because they were really not knowing anything, like who started first, who shot, why they shot, and so on and so forth. So I thought it's good to have this kind of a very brutal start into all this happening. So of course, with this audience, we debated not just the past, or not debated just about the past, but also some about the fact that the film apparently speaks about, I think, you know, general values, themes about lie, about compromise, about our relationship with our own mistakes from our recent past, and also the fact that, you know, we are living in a world today where, if we talk about manipulation through media, and especially social media, things are, you know, not too different from what we've seen in the film, even though back then this kind of manipulation came just through one single channel, which was the Romanian public TV. It was the only TV actually existing in Romania back then.
You are known as a director who hasn't shied away from difficult subjects, from incest to corruption at high levels of society, and also tackling difficult genres as comedy. Few other directors in your generation have dared to do comedy. Why this historical film? The film has the way you approach this film is I should say a film in itself, because it's such an interesting story. You haven't been you weren't attached to the film in the beginning. You came quite late, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, I was not planned to do it, and honestly, if somebody would have asked me before, like, if I would do something about these events, I would have said no. It's too early. It was not at all on my agenda, but
you weren't obsessed by
I wasn't at all, but when I read about this thing happened for real in Sibiu, with these prisoners being detained in a pool for more than 1 month, and with this kind of a setting of a Greek tragedy, like, you know, everybody is staying in just one single place, this empty pool, and, you know, there is this total confusion about, you know, if there are any, you know, positive heroes or villains, or who shot and who didn't. I thought that's a great premises for setting up. You know, it could have been a play, a dramatic play, but also like premises for a great story for a film. So I thought it's too bizarre and too challenging as not to do this kind of film. And I really delved into the story. I spent around more than, I think, 2 years and a half into the research period. I've interviewed, I mean, I read a couple of books based on these events, of course, some of them written by the militia people, the police, some other written by the army. Of course, their narrative was totally conflicting. But for me, what mattered a lot was meeting the real people and not just, you know, the obvious people working for police or Securitate, but also the civilians. For me, those were the meetings which mattered a lot, because they were full of emotion, full of, I felt something which I was not at all sure at the beginning when I started the project, that, you know, the trauma was huge. I mean, it was much more than I've imagined. I thought that, you know, 30 years later, things would have, you know, time has passed and you know, you might forget. But for many of them, they were, I mean, I've met a young guy in the pool, Luci, who's now obviously, you know, an adult, and I thought, because he was the youngest, I thought he would give to me like lots of details and information and everything. But surprisingly, his memories were so vague, and I thought, you know, maybe he doesn't want to tell. But actually he told me, Tudor, I wanted to, immediately after I was released, I wanted to forget. That was the most horrible weeks in my life. I was 16 back then. I stayed there for more than 3 weeks, not knowing anything and not knowing why I mean, they keep me there. And I realized that, you know, they don't want to talk about it. They perceive it still as a sort of a trauma, as I said, but as a sort of a, it's shameful what happened to them, because nobody, you know, talked to them. Has to explain that, you know, you were not guilty, you were not, it's not any reason to feel this kind of shame. But back then, that was the perception. I mean, it was, if you were in the pool, it was equally like you were obviously, you know, terrorist or related to the secret police or whatever. So it was, all these meetings, I think, were so powerful and actually made me feel more responsible. And together with our scriptwriter, with Cecilia, she's a great professional, we changed a bit the story. The script initially, the first draft was more like telling the whole story through the perspective of the main lead, of the Viorel, of the police officer. But then we realized that it's so many interesting stories we found out, so we thought, let's try to make more like a ensemble piece, more like a choral film, which obviously was, you know, raised more difficulties in terms of storytelling, but we thought, let's try it at least to see if it's working.
And I would say not only in terms of storytelling, because I think it's, you said an important thing, that this is an ensemble, the film, and it's wonderful. You see very few films in Romanian cinema that have so many characters and well-defined, and you have managed to, you know, to orchestrate this ensemble of wonderful actors. Tell us about the experience of working with so many actors and the experience of recreating that grey, derelict, violent, end of the world, you know, environment at the end of Romanian communism.
I mean, it was not as complicated as you know it might look, because I mean, we are, you know, that's our job. That's our job, to recreate some, I mean, it's about using all elements from, you know, set design, costume, music, sound, and you try to do your best and to do research and to... The one thing that was complicated to explain to the young actors, you know, the whole background, this hysteric mood of it, like everybody was hysteric, everybody was shouting, it was a lot of beatings, a lot of this outburst of violence which was everywhere, because people felt, you know, that was their moment, and the hate against the regime, hate against the militia, the security was so big. I mean, if people would have met on the streets, you know, all these people, there were lots of killings, and people were, you know, using whatever they would find, stones, whatever, just to terminate the officers. So I've explained to these young actors, like, you know, you all have to play in this kind of high pitch, yeah, and luckily we found lots of recordings on YouTube, so I was able to show them and to see, you know, how was the whole environment there. And for them, I think it was useful, because they don't have any information. I mean, for them, there are people that were born after the year 2000 talking about these events. It's like, you know, going back so back in time, and they don't have the instruments to understand. When I was continuously, you know, in our first meeting, telling them about securitate, about securist, like the people who work, securitate. And I've used this word many times, and one of them raised their hand and said, Tudor, apparently you are using this with kind of such a bad connotation, that there is something, but please fill us with more info, because we don't get it. Why are you? So I realized back then there is an obvious gap of information and gap of, which is obviously, I mean, we are speaking about two different generations. And I've managed somehow to transport them all into this kind of a mood. And you're right, I mean, working with, we had, I think, more than 120 actors, but they somehow, you know, it happened, they were all great, and we managed the ensemble to work great. And I was very happy also to find Alex, the main lead. It's his first role in cinema. He never did any feature film, any short film. It's actually his first experience with camera, and it was like amazing what he has did. Again, I mean, he was surrounded by, I think, creme de la creme of Romanian film actors, but we really, I think, worked hard on every scene, and we did lots of rehearsals, and I was very pleased with their involvement.
In your film, you're talking about a very painful moment, a traumatic moment, as you rightly put it. At the same time, what I find extraordinary about this film, that you have managed to keep the balance. You find that life is never black and white. You find humanity in every character, from the securist, or the member of the securitate, of course the policeman, the militia guy, and of course from the civilians who, by the ironies of history, were brought there together with their tormentors. In Romania, because this is it's a foundational moment of our country. It's a moment that it's really very important, very sensitive issue. What was the reaction of the film towards this way of seeing, giving voice to every character in this traumatic, complicated, and still obscure history?
I mean, it was not easy, because I think we were used with this kind of a very triumphalist approach to the revolution. I mean, even if you ask youngsters who were learning about history, that's all what they know about the revolution. Like, the Romanian people were on the streets, we defeated communism, Ceausescu was killed, and that's how Romanians, won the fight against communism, and we were free, and basta. And they don't get the nuances and everything what happened. So it was pretty unique and difficult choice to focus and to have actually a main lead, a guy who, despite the fact he's sympathetical and he's a family man, he is working for police, and he's working for an institution which was hated by the people. But I thought it would be very interesting to have this kind of a reverse angle, and to try to change a bit the perspectives, because for years, of course, most of the films were focusing on this, obvious positive heroes fighting for freedom, which here it's a bit different. And it was not, I think, easy always for people, that there were comments of people, angry on my approach and saying that I'm whitewashing securitate, and I'm minimizing their crimes and so on and so forth, which I did not want at all to happen. Actually, at the end of the film, I think it's very relevant, and I think it was important to happen like this hero to be punished, and because he was actually working for this institution who was heavily used by Ceausescu in repression and as a instrument of dictatorship. But yeah, it was very complicated for some part of the public to really face this kind of, or to deal with this kind of a change of perspective?
But apparently not for the film community in Romania. This film, we have these Romanian Oscars. They are called the Coppola prizes, and this film really broke the bank. I mean, I think it's the record, right, of film nine plus prizes: best film, best direction, best screenplay, best actor, best actor in a title role, in a main role, best supporting actor, screen, I said that, makeup, sound, and so on. Even cinematography didn't get a prize, but got the prize. I think it's also very prestigious, the prize of Romania, Association of Romanian Cinematographers. So really, was totally a record, and some of the filmmakers in the room were, okay, let's leave, because by the end of the evening, all prizes will go to this new Star Wars, I don't know what is, Schindler's List, or whatever these films in Hollywood take all the prizes. Were you surprised by this reaction? Because these awards are voted by the film community.
I mean, the award game is always, it's about sensibilities, and it's about, what people feel about us, in a very specific moment, and I'm sure this kind of team effort, impressed many people, and it doesn't mean that my film is better than the other, but I think it was most of the awards, I think, were very well deserved for all the professionals who worked on the film. I mean, it was impressive, but I think, people really kind of acknowledged the effort, because it was a team effort, a huge team effort. We shot it in just 30 days, which is very little. I mean, for the people who know cinema, usually, I mean, within, if we would have had a decent budget, which we didn't, this film would have been shot, I think, in at least 45 days due to the complexity and the locations and the number of actors. But yeah, we tried to do it in 30 days, and yeah, it kind of worked.
I think it worked very, very well. I told you, you wouldn't acknowledge any merit. I'd like now to open the floor for questions, remarks from the audience. Raluca will tell me when we should stop, right?
7 more minutes.
7 more minutes, okay. So let's be brief and, let's start with the gentleman over there.
Yeah, I have a question for Tudor. Thank you, Tudor, for having us. I was wondering, the larger ecosystem of world cinema, who inspired you as a director?
Who is, sorry?
Who inspired you or inspired you as a director?
For this particular film, or in general?
In general.
I'm an old-fashioned guy, so I'm inspired by some of the new wave French directors, mostly by François Truffaut. But I would say my favorite director still is Stanley Kubrick, which I think is an amazing professional, and actually he was such an inspiration because he did so many different kind of films. He tried to do so many different genres, and he did it so masterfully and did it with so many, he did masterpieces. So I'm trying, at my level to at least to experience different stuff. I mean, I think it would be boring to do the same kind of film always on and on.
Yeah, over there.
Yes, I have a question about the closing graphics.
Would you like to take the mic?
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
The people of Romania were brutally repressed under the communist regime. Hundreds of thousands were killed, tortured, imprisoned without trial. Yet in the closing graphics, you say the people in the swimming pool were illegally detained. Why did you use the word illegally?
Because from a pure, I would say, if you analyze it from pure like law from a pure like justice perspective. I spoke with the prosecutor who actually runs now the whole file of the revolution, and his conclusion was obvious, like they were illegally detained because you could not, especially with the civilians, that's why I ended the film with them. It was how you would keep people without being, some of them without being interrogated, or you would keep them just like this, not knowing if they were terrorists or not, but they weren't, and you keep them illegally. So it was obvious illegal to detain these people without a proper investigation. And I also, I think, wanted to the whole thing which happened there in the pool was so bizarre. I've met the real commander of the army, I mean of the army unit. Surprisingly, he accepted to be interviewed, and I spent, I think, more than 2 or 3 long meetings. It was more like a monologue, but I was keep asking him, like, why did you do this? And it was illegal, and it was, you didn't feed them, your people beat them, and so on, and it was a lot also about civilians again. And he said, it was very interesting what he said. He said, don't put the blame on me, because I was responsible to keep them alive. I put them in this pool. Yeah, it was cold, it was this, but I mean, it was not. We didn't feel better in our place as well, and I kept them to be able, the investigation to start. I mean, the prosecutors to start. We at the army unit, we were not prosecutors, we were not investigators. So I saved their lives, and I started to laugh and said, how did you? And actually he was right, because if those people would have been sent on the streets, or they would have been released, so that's, I think, the whole paradox and the absurd situation. If they would have been released, people on the streets would have been for sure, killed them, or whatever, run after them or beat them or whatever. So it was not the intention of not dealing or not depicting the whole consequences of the communist regime and crimes and so on, but I thought, it's not, I didn't want to open a history lesson of 45 years of communism. I plan to do maybe another film focusing on the 50s and what happened with what the communists did there with the labor camps and so on. That's another story. But with this particular thing, I think I've used the word after consulting with the prosecutors.
Yeah, good. I wouldn't say it's the thing that stood out to me the most, but something that kind of caught my attention were the army soldiers around the pool towards the end. Obviously, they get tired too. They kind of got sort of casual. Yeah. Right. They're smoking cigarettes. They're kind of half paying attention. They bring out the TV. I thought that was an interesting sort of a subtle thing happening in the background. You didn't draw direct attention to it, but that mood kind of changes. Is it there for that long? Mostly, I just wanted to say that I like that. If I had a question, though, I think along those lines, certainly something that stood out was when the soldier drops the gun, into the pool, because he was dozing off, right, or something. And was that a pure fiction, or did you hear a story like that? Was that a detail you?
I heard one people from the pool told me this, but then when I rechecked with others, nobody remembered. So I'm not sure if it happened or not, but I liked it so much, so I've used it, and of course I've extended it, and I thought it was interesting. And for me, I would say maybe the most essential meeting I've had in this research period, beside meeting the couple who lost their child in the car, which was, I think, heartbreaking moment, and my meeting with them was really very complicated one, emotionally. But another, I think, important meeting was with a guy. He works now in the Ministry of Defense in Romania, so I think he's 50 and something, but he was one of these young soldiers from the pool, and he was actually, his colleague was the one killed in front of the militia building, and he told me, I mean, his recollections and his stories really was so important, because he said, yeah, we are, I mean, I'm feeling bad now. Yeah, it's as you depicted, and yeah, we beat them, we did this and that, but believe me, we were we feared about our own lives. That's what they've told us, that, you know, they are terrorists and other terrorists would come to release them. So it was about survival. And they were a bunch of young people not knowing anything. They did not sleep. They had all this munition and guns, and they did not know how to use them. You know, talking to them, I realized, you know, and of course, after some weeks, the situation relaxed, and as you know, there were like friendships starting, and it was, I think, a very important, discussion I had, which helped me a bit to understand also their perspective.
I'm afraid the last one, the lady over there.
I don't want to have a question, but I just want to say that I think that you were able to capture what a revolution is, which in hindsight, or the conclusion of a revolution is freedom. And we know from the French Revolution, we have their song with Fraternité, Liberté, Égalité. But I think you captured what a revolution means, which is really violence. It is killing, and a lot of dichotomies of who's right, who's wrong, where the justice lies and where the freedom lies. Because at the end, actually, your end is very pessimistic. I want to stop here. So I want to commend you that for me, you capture that awful sense of revolution that is an awful thing that is happening.
So let's have one last question, but a question. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the history is obscure regarding the revolution, and I know from friends in the industry that in Hollywood, for example, the narrative is strongly controlled about villains, about what's right and wrong in society. So how did you decide? Did you encounter very strong opposing opinions about what happened, and how did you decide ethically how the narrative is going to be presented?
Luckily, it's an event which was, before I think the film was released, was very obscure. I mean, I think nobody wanted to talk about it deliberately throughout the years, because it was not very, I mean, the army wouldn't want to open it up, and for people in Sibiu, as said, trauma was so big. I mean, they all knew, but nobody was, you know, beside a couple of TV shows dealing with this. If you ask people in Romania, if you would have asked before, people would not know what happened. So I think for me, it was not a question of, you know, feeling, you know, kind of like an opposition related to the subject, or I had total freedom of, you know, doing it, you know, starting from script, from production, despite the fact that while we were shooting, it was COVID, horrible moment, especially shooting with hundreds of people, but also the Ukraine war started, and we had to shoot, you know, in military units with all these guns and so on. I mean, it was very tense back then. But I would say that we really, I mean, I was lucky that it was not a controversial story, like a publicly known controversial story. I mean, after we released the film, of course, there were people, especially working in the defense, in the Ministry of Defense, saying, "Oh, maybe it's isn't it too much? Like, isn't it too is it true that?" But I think the young soldiers, as I mentioned, they came up with this attitude, and they helped me because they said, "We were there. That's how it happened. I mean, it's not at all, you know, manipulated, or these are the real facts."
Without being scared of prosecution, right?
Yeah. what for me was, I think, a very, and I'm trying to make it short. What for me was, I think, the irony of the whole thing, which, I mean, we know in Romania things end up, when they end up in court, sometimes, you know, the real guilty people are not punished, and, you know, if there is a trial and they reach a decision, you cannot change it. It's like a rule of law. And what happened here was that there were a couple of people who were investigated, and it was this commander of the army, it was this crazy army officer from the hospital who was acted like a dictator, and he was really capable of horrible things, like he was, you know, he saw that there were ill people, and, you know, he was just, you know, taking cords and stuff out of their belly. I mean, he was really horrible. Also, it was an army officer, the one with who killed. I mean, he was using the guns, really killing a lot of people in front of him. All these people were, you know, they were not guilty. After years, it was, I think, 2007 or 2009. The prosecutors back then decided to finish this case and to say that we do not have enough arguments. And I mean, I found arguments, and it's not me, but, you know, and now the young military prosecutors told me, Tudor, this is how happened in Romania for 10, 15 years after the revolution. All the trials were such, in a way, directed or diverted, or as not to, it was like, you know, the politics of those days, like, you would not allow to say that, you know, for example, army did killings, because they needed, the politicians needed the army as to keep, you know, things and the order in the country and so on. While also with Securitate, it was the same. My opinion is that they started the shooting here in Sibiu. They did it in other cities. Nobody was, you know, put under accusation. I mean, they did all this game of, you know, sending people from one city to another, you know, losing tracks of people, and that's it. So that's what happened. And yeah, unfortunately, you know, so many people died, but we don't have you know, we just have a couple of people who were punished or investigated or, you know, sent to prison.
Well, it's fantastic that we have art and film to tell these stories, and the message is very powerful. People can make up their minds, and this is very important. The fact that not only we're talking about the freedom, but we have the freedom to say it the way we want. So thank you very much for being here tonight and sharing this important moment. Don't forget to take care of this wonderful organization, the Alex Fund. Don't forget about Romanian art, about Romanian film. There is more to come here in New York. But mainly, please join me in thanking the one and only Tudor Giurgiu.
Please join us.